And you're live.
This is House Education Thursday, May 8th, 2025. The Education Committee is continuing its discussion on H54, the Phone-Free Schools Bill. This morning, we are going to hear from the Agency of Education to get their take on our proposal, and forward to that. Floor is yours.
Morning, folks.
Good morning.
I feel like it's been a minute.
I've been busy.
We've been a little busy. Good to see you all again. So for the record, Jill Briggs Campbell, Deputy Secretary of Education, and I am joined by
Lindsay Hedges, Interim Director of Policy and Communications. Lisa Hill, Assistant Division Director, Student Pathways.
and I know we only have 30 minutes, so we'll be very efficient. And I'll just give some kind of brief opening remarks about the work that we've kind of been doing with our partners in the field, just to make sure that we have sort of a consensus when we come in. And then I will gratefully hand it off to Lindsay and Lisa to kind of walk through our recommendations. So in looking at the bill that we sort of knew was coming, because it's been floating around, in the fall, we actually pulled together our field partners with the Vs. So we asked them what their kind of concerns and considerations were. At the time, we were sort of asking them, is this something that you want the agency to put forward? And we had started to kind of think about some policies at the time. Coming back around, I think that we actually have areas of broad consensus here, which is helpful. So I think there maybe is a bit of room and difference between what in terms of timeline and maybe some of the specifics with VTNEA, but I think there's a lot of consensus. Where I think we generally share some concerns, ensuring that there's plenty of time for implementation, ensuring that we sort of keep the right level of specificity between statute, policy, and procedures. And we'll be kind of highlighting some areas where we think there could be some refinements to the bill that capture that, because given the pace of sort of technological change, you don't want to have in statute something that you're going to have to keep revisiting constantly, but rather you want those changes to be happening in policy and procedures. So we have some recommendations around that. And then also we have a recommendation around having the agency in consultation with the VSBA and the other Vs draft a policy, a model policy that then districts are able to adjust and adapt as needed for their particular circumstances. So again, I think that's probably the key takeaway. You're going to hear a lot of the same things, I think, from most of the V organizations. And so that's kind of our main thing. So with that, I will actually have Lisa and Lindsay come up. And Lisa's just going to give a brief summary around some context in terms of data that we've actually already collected that I think will be informative to the conversation. And then also work that the agency has been doing with the schools around guidelines, best practices. And we also have some information and commentary around the social media section. So I'll kick it over to that.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'll be speaking from two documents you will have. One are the slides. The other is our guidance document we released in February for your references. So speaking from the slides, I have been with the agency about 5 years now and previously was the education technology coordinator. I'm still wearing that hat in some respects as the assistant division director, and that's why I'm speaking to you this morning. The annual technology survey is just what it says. We're right now compiling all of the data from the 23-24 school term. The data I'm sharing with you came from data from last school year, 23-24, even though that report is not yet on the web. Going to the cell phone school policies, we had 277 schools respond across the state of Vermont to the questions on cell phone policies. When we looked at that data, you could see, does everyone have those, or do you need me to recite that? What I think is of importance to you in looking at these statistics is that our school districts and supervisory unions and schools are very much engaged in this, well aware. And I always find it incredibly inspiring to work with our districts and school boards who are thinking ahead on that. So we see that 50-50 split. However, it doesn't tell the whole story. Since that survey was out, we have had additional school districts and schools adopt cell phone policy. We will be putting out a new survey here this summer, and we'll gather that data at that time. When we look at, drill down a little bit further on the next slide, you see that those that did not have were mainly elementary schools, which makes sense. I think it's interesting to note some of the reasons why there are not cell phone policies. This was a minority of schools specifically that said they did not have cell phone policies as far as reasons why. The parent opposition was only brought up once, which I think is interesting when you listen to the national news. But in our study, only one school called that out specifically. Going to the next slide, what I found was a mix of policies, full-blown policies. Then we had things that talked about being a procedure or a rule. And within this document, you will see examples of those. Two characteristics, they either went for full-day restrictions or they had schedule-based restrictions, which again, you'll see examples in here. The schedule-based restrictions were mainly in the high schools. Middle and elementary, they were typically, if there was something in place, it was a ban, but we did have some middle schools that had schedule-based systems. So you can look in the guidance, which came out. The only other thing I'd note on cell phone policies is with this out, AOE is very invested in helping our districts craft their policies and procedures. So if you look on pages 4 through 6, you're going to see we actually put together some templates, so to speak, based on what we found in the field and best practices nationally. Our intent in May, getting late, isn't it, to hold a virtual session to walk all of our ed tech directors through this as they are, with at least half our schools still looking at it. So you can look at that. Just a few words now on social media, which we also ask questions about that in terms of blocking. I also wear the cybersecurity hat at the agency for all our schools, and you should feel good that they are very much engaged. That's a whole other topic. But part of doing that is the firewalls that they have in place, which block on the student devices, block access to certain sites. And so when you look at these statistics and we talk about blocking, we are speaking specifically to school-issued devices, and that's how they're doing it through those firewalls. So even though it says only 15 said they blocked all, that really isn't representative of the breadth of what they're blocking. That's just how they responded. Most of them responded, as you see in that final, let me see in the next slide, they actually just listed what they blocked. Certainly TikTok is one of the big issues right now, which we've read the news on that. They're blocking TikTok. I see a lot of discussion among the ed tech directors. Of course, we have very creative students who find ways around that. You should feel confident that even with that, the ed tech directors are discussing how do we block that and how do we. So when they say they block it, they're serious about it and they are pursuing it. You can see the reasons why they do it. But for this discussion, it's probably the final slide that I think we must consider. This was admittedly a minority that said they did not block it, but the reasons are still, I think, worth noting. Particularly the idea about teaching students personal responsibility. And I think as this committee considers how you might represent social media definitions, and the like in their thinking about that aspect as far as what the schools are doing academically within classes and how they're handling that is certainly an important consideration. We don't want to hide our students from all of this. We want to teach them how to engage with that as informed citizens. So as Lindsay will speak to, we want to hit that balance so that schools still have that freedom to academically teach our children how to responsibly and ethically interact with all of this, including the AI component. And so those would be some information for you to consider. Okay. Thank you, Lisa.
So thank you again for allowing us to provide testimony on H54. As Jill noted at the top, we have broad consensus on this topic, and the agency feels pretty strongly that this is the right step to be taking for the well-being of Vermont students as well as educators. The agency supports a statewide approach, and again, we're trying to strike the right balance in supporting the ongoing work that's happening, not duplicating or disrupting that, and also supporting those half of schools that don't have a policy yet in place. And so we have, again, our intent is to recognize and kind of build upon those good practices that are already happening and are well underway. And the goal is to use those efforts as a model for districts that haven't started engaging in this yet. So we have a few considerations that I'm going to dig into, provide some recommendations for your consideration as you continue to mark up the bill. So starting off, implementation timeline, if you're going to pursue this bill this session, the agency recommends an implementation beginning 26-27 school year. And this timeline would allow for the development of that model policy, clear communication and coordination with the field, as well as clear communication and coordination on the local level. We know that there's strong opinions on the parent and caregiver side of things on both sides of the coin. So we want to make sure that there's adequate time for schools to be kind of engaging in their communities to make sure everyone has the information that they need. In terms of model policy development, again, with all of this information in hand, we believe that we are well situated to collaborate with the Vermont School Boards Association to create a model policy and ensure that there is cohesive and an equitable approach across the state. We believe some of the merits of a model policy include reduced variation and inconsistencies around the state, as well as promoting equity across districts. And for those of you newer to the community, or to the committee, I should say, the AOE model policy construct sets the floor, not a ceiling, for policies. So we would be creating a policy that districts without one could take and implement, or they could take and tweak, make more robust, make changes to it as they see fit. So that is our recommendation on that. And then in terms of flexibility and exceptions, the agency recommends including broad carve-outs to, again, maintain that local flexibility and recognize school-specific needs. And we have heard anecdotes, and I know you have as well, on the need for carve-outs for a variety of good reasons. In your bill right now, you have, I believe it's for dual enrollment and CTE, and we have recommended some language that was intended to kind of sweep that in and more. And so we have currently, if an administrator grants permission for a student to possess or use a cell phone for an academically sound reason. And as Lisa touched upon earlier, we know that there's really engaging and creative work happening in classrooms that from time to time is reliant on technology, including cell phones. And so we want to continue to do that where it makes sense at the discretion of education leaders. In terms of cost considerations, implementation may have cost implications that we are not aware of, including storage and facility updates. So in an effort to be aware of any potential unfunded mandates, the agency recommends that a fiscal note be included just to assess the financial impact and make sure that schools are receiving adequate support as they embark on this. And then lastly, with the social media provisions, again, this is rapidly changing landscape, and we believe that this section needs a bit more review. And so if you plan to move this bill this session, the agency recommends removing this section and focusing solely on cell phone use. If you do keep it in, keeping the language high level, and allowing, again, that local policy to adapt to changing terminology, definitions, and as technology evolves, kind of allowing it to be flexible in that nature. We did have some specific concerns, specifically in Section 2, subsection 6, with the definition of social media and concern around it being overly broad and unintentionally sweeping in platforms that schools currently use. So again, we're just trying to avoid any potential disruption that this has potential to cause. And so with that, I think we can open it up for questions. That's kind of the extent of our recommendations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCann.
I'm wondering if the agency has put some thought into delineating by grade level of the schools. Would the policy look different, or would that baseline policy that you're talking about, that template or whatever, would that be for all 3 grade, the elementary, middle, and high school, and then educators do what they do to change it due to the audience that they have at their school? Or were you thinking that you would have different ones for elementary, middle, and high school?
Yeah, we haven't pursued that necessarily in model policies in the past. It's certainly something we could consider. I would say in setting a model policy, the goal would be for then the local grade bands to be able to tweak it and customize it to their needs.
And I might add just a little bit, when we did our survey work, I also asked them to give me copies of what they're doing. Mount Mansfield, that school district is a good example. They have a different policy for elementary, middle, and high school. And I'm just looking at their one for the high school. They've got actually 9th and 10th grade guidelines, and then they have 11th and 12th grade guidelines. So they are parsing it. But I liked, how Lindsay expressed it in terms of what the AOE's work would be is to set the floor. And that would give that basis. Our intent at this point, without any kind of legislation, is to pull in great examples that have happened right now to share with all of our districts that we'll be doing in a virtual webinar so that we can learn from each other. And we will be showcasing that.
I think my sort of gut reaction here is this seems to be taking something that is, to me, fairly simple and obvious and turning it bureaucratic, unnecessarily bureaucratic. We've got school districts who have simply just done this, full bans, and have been reporting back to us with data from Harvard that it works and that you don't have to spend any money. I guess so. I'm a little sort of leery. We don't know what your model policy would be. I don't think I heard you say that it would be a required model policy. Is that the intention?
The intent would be that it would be a required model policy.
And I worry about a floor that doesn't really get to the results we're seeing in other districts. I don't know. It's as I keep bringing up the example, it seems kind of like smoking. And if we aren't just like, if this isn't clear, I think we may sort of regret kind of being wishy-washy about how we approach it.
I can speak to that.
Sure.
So, what we were sort of originally conceptualizing when we were talking to our partners in the field is something that looks a lot like the Act 29. It's in terms of statute, it's a really brief statement, right? Again, it's statute, policy, procedures, right? So in statute, it is, you have your intent language, and then it's the agency in consultation with the VSBA or whoever it is that you want to list, shall develop a model policy that meets these specific requirements and shall update it from time to time. Like very kind of brief language there, but with clear intent. And then we would be working with the field, and we have a lot of in-house expertise in this area. So our intention has always been to look at what's working in the field as the model for what we would do. And there is that balance between laying out the general principles that every district should meet as a standard, but also with those policies having guidance and procedures that goes with it so that they've got the entire package. And when we talk to our partners in the SBA, we're working through this right now with the Act 29 PTA model policy. There's also a level of generality that you want in the policy that then points to the procedures, right? So there's that kind of Russian doll of specificity as you work your way through to the final implementation. So I don't think that we're saying that we would, that anybody would be interested in the agency releasing something that is generic to the point of not being useful. I think that what we're saying is we have heard a call, and I think you all have as well, for more kind of state level standardization on things that matter to avoid a situation where every district has to make up their own. So I think that's the
shared goal that we have. But if there are specific areas of focus, then we would say that you should call us out in the intent language and meet those requirements.
Representative Dobrovich is online.
So, I feel like you guys, the AOE may be missing the purpose of this bill in some aspects about, creating this safe space for kids bell to bell to be disconnected from their phones and social media. So I'm going to get to your comment about the social media definition. So in this bill, it doesn't say that schools can't use social media. The purpose of the social media area is the school can't compel students to use social media. They can't force them to, they can't require them to. If the school wants to use it for posting activities for the community to see, if the schools want to use it in a like a digital learning, like to know how to use all of these things, they can use it at the instructor's discretion. It doesn't say that the school can't use any of it. It says that we can't compel the students to use any of these things. And I think that is where it makes the definition very strong, because it is not prohibiting the school. It is prohibiting the school of requiring the students to use it. I think, like, as I read through your information, I think we're missing those things. We're missing that this isn't about just being able to educate our students and have that distraction of the phone during the education time taken away. It's about giving them that place to come and be disconnected for 6 to 7 hours of the day, instead of waiting for the ding in their phone or on their pocket to leave class and read the phone in the hallway, or not hang out at lunch and just be on their phone. So with that said, I'd like to know if that changes your thoughts around social media and some of the things that you've been discussing or have in these documents.
Social media, please.
There you are. Hi.
You don't need to look at the.
Yes, thank you. I don't have the legislation in front of me. There were a couple of problems in the wording on social media. For example, one part of the bill states that students cannot be required. What I had problems with it wasn't clear that schools could inform students that announcements were available via Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever they were doing. So that was unclear what the school's role could be. Also, I believe the social media definition, I brought everything else.
I should also say it's evolving.
Yeah, was so broad that it was encompassing things that we would probably not want to include. When we look, for example, at the development of AI within certain applications that would allow some sort of two-way communication potentially, the way that's defined, it could again begin to impact some of that technology. So what we were advising is to take a careful look at that. I would particularly want to share that with the field, to have them respond to that definition so that we could make sure that without no ill intent, we were not impacting something that we didn't mean to.
Representative Long?
I am looking at your recommended language here that you put in, and I'm curious because it doesn't. It says update, it says shall develop and from time to time update a policy to limit or prohibit the use of cell phones. So it has been, I think, this committee's desire to not just limit, but prevent cell phones to be used, with the understanding that there are times, and that's the part we're working through, are times when certain students might need to use them. So that's the language we're working on. I'm curious, do you What is the agency stand on a ban on cell phone use from bell to bell?
Yeah, I think the agency is supportive of a bell-to-bell prohibition, but again, with those carve-outs that make sense for a given school community. So in instances where there is a course where an educator is, having students use the phone for science experiments, or, you all heard plenty of anecdotes.
Right, I understand
Yeah.
that. I mean, we're in agreement on all that. What I'm saying is the recommended language actually doesn't do a bell to bell. It says limit or prohibit.
If I could
It's pretty clear, not all of us are in agreement with the idea that a student should be
Right.
compelled to have a phone.
Absolutely, and we know students don't all have them.
And the limit language allows things like we have English language learners. So for example, they may be using their phone all day for translation. We may have students who are homeless, for example. So that's why limit, that term is used. And again, as
I think
Jill
the
mentioned, we would be
intent
very clear on the intent of that.
I would hope that in no intent would require any student to own a phone. So when we say EL students using their phone all day, I would hope that no school would say that an EL student has to have a phone. Representative McCann and Representative Harple.
I actually appreciate the language that says restrict. I'm not in agreement on a bell-to-bell ban. I appreciate all of the work that you've done getting information from the field and collaborating with the Bs and others. And I appreciate that educators, both at the AOE and educators involved in that discussion are there. And I really appreciate the fact that you've laid out that there are these two approaches, the full day restrictions and the schedule-based restrictions, and that you want to be respectful of the fact that you've got school districts where policies are working and kids are off their phones and doing work and having conversations and discussions one way or another, whichever way they have chosen. And if it's not broken, maybe don't fix it. So thank you for your testimony this morning.
Representative Harple.
Well, I think it is broken, severely broken. And I haven't really heard yet of any scenarios, except with maybe the exception of athletic training that was brought up yesterday, that we can't provide these same things on a school issued device, including like an ELL learner, school issued iPad. I've worked with kids carry around an iPad all day, they're nonverbal. And it totally works. So I'm not really sure what problem we would need to solve by doing this. The one piece of language that said an administrator could approve certain things because we know that they're involved and we don't know what apps are going to use. It seems like that would take care of that and still being able to maintain all of these restrictions.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I feel very strongly sort of about this issue in general. I'm not necessarily opposed to leaving the sort of evolving policy development to the agency or another entity. The way it has generally worked in tradition is that the legislature passes something and generally the VSBA creates a model policy for school districts to adopt if they so choose. Any other questions or comments? So I do want to say this is an evolving. We've already we're going to be looking at new language in just a little bit. Go ahead, Representative Harple.
I'm also just wondering, you mentioned, putting off any implementation to the 26-27 school year. I don't know if it would be impossible to get it going by the next school year. I mean, I guess we're kind of close, but it doesn't seem like it's that much of a stretch to me. And it seems like some things we're trying to rush really fast that are really big changes, and other things are easier to implement. We're saying let's delay them. So
Can I respond to that? I'm going to channel my inner Sue Sabowski, because she's not here, but and former school board members would want me to say, because we ran into this issue, that school boards are generally not in session over the summer. So when we asked them to then develop and adopt a policy, we like we went smack into just the logistical issue. So that was, I mean, really as like a baseline, that was an issue. But I think that we would feel comfortable with, you know, the timeline of, you know, by December 1, the agency shall, you know, release a model policy. And then I think also, I don't want to lose a comment that Lisa made, which is absent any changes to statute, the agency is moving forward here, and a lot of districts are as well, right? So I think we don't want to think that nothing is moving. And we will be releasing kind of those various sort of templates so that folks have a model if they're choosing to move forward in the interim. And there is a lot of momentum around that. So we wouldn't want to slow that down. But I take your point. I do think that folks feel urgency. We just kind of ran right into some.
Well, that reason actually makes sense, so I'm
Yeah.
glad that I asked. Yeah.
So I just want to clarify, what's in front of us that we present today represents a sort of consensus point of view from what organizations?
So from VSBA, VSA, VPA, VISA has also provided some testimony, which they would sort of want to highlight some of the other things for independent schools, but I think it would work with them. I would say, Colin, I see you over there. I think VTNEA is generally on the same page, but probably there's a little bit more spacing difference in the nuance there, but I don't think there's major differences. So I do actually think this is a general consensus.
Yeah, we also had some folks from the Pediatric Society
That's right.
that were also in these conversations and are generally in support of the direction we're moving.
It's nice when you have a general consensus.
Yes.
Sometimes
Yes.
it's
So yeah, I'll just, my concern would be that sometimes when the legislature passes something, the agencies that are required to carry it out don't necessarily fulfill that dream. And I realize this is not a big thing. This is a pretty easy thing. But I guess I need assurance that this isn't going to get lost in some sort of capacity, bureaucratic, this person left, this person is brand new and we can't move forward, morass.
We'll say
So I
the,
can- oh, go ahead.
I was just going to point you to the last page in our testimony. We have a handful of links, and the top one is the guidance that Lisa and her team has put together. So we are already multiple steps in the right direction on this. So I think that this is work that we can pick up and run with.
I think there's a key difference here. So in some of the previous requirements for the agency to develop, say, a model policy, we had signaled at the time and continue to signal that we did not have an expert. And there was literally no statewide expert in the thing that we were being asked to draft. And we've been resourceful about securing those experts as needed and moving forward. In this case, we have 2 experts in-house, and as Lindsay said, we're already well down the path of we started this conversation in the fall with all of those various folks, including the pediatric community. So we're actually far down this path, and so I can say with a high degree of confidence that I think that this is work that the agency can execute on timeline.
And Brady?
I apologize if I missed this in the beginning. Can you just share a little bit more of the process, particularly with VSBA, VPA, VSA, this sort of collaborative or working together? Is that like there have been stakeholder meetings and there's a small group of people? Is that just the responding to the annual technology survey? Like, can you be more specific about
Yeah, it
what
was.
that process has been?
It was in response to the legislature's interest in this topic last session. I believe the Pediatric Society was actually the ones taking the lead that joined this group together. I think it was a pre-existing group that had met on a variety of topics in the past. And we all felt that, you know, cell phones were something that was important. It was a topic that the legislature was interested in. So we met a handful of times and had kind of circulated some draft language and met and we're discussing this and kind of figuring out path forward. So that was kind of where this is stemming from.
And then more recently, we brought everyone back together and sort of did a check-in with this language. And so the written testimony here is a representative consensus.
Other questions? If not, great. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us and for providing us some model language.